She said it with fire in her eyes and grease on her apron. "I ain't my mother, but I can cook just as good." He didn't flinch, just handed her a sack of beans and one chance. Neither knew that supper would become something like salvation. The door of the Lone Trail Saloon swung open not with a bang but a creak, and every eye inside turned. Not because of the sound, but because of who walked through. Clara June, tall, sun-bitten, 19 and done with waiting on fate, stepped in with nothing but a flour sack in one hand and fire in the other. The saloon wasn't hiring cooks. Wasn't hiring anyone, truth be told. But that didn't stop her from stomping straight up to the bar where he stood, arms crossed, eyes like dried-up thunderclouds. Cole Merritt. The man hadn't smiled since the war ended, and even then it had been more grimace than grin. He ran the saloon the way he lived, quiet, stern, and with one finger always resting near the hammer of a pistol that hadn't seen daylight in years but never gathered dust. "I ain't my mother," Clara said, voice cutting through smoke and silence. "But I can cook just as good, maybe better. You give me one chance, Mr. Merritt, one meal. You don't like it, I walk." The place chuckled low and mean. A few drunks jeered. One man whispered, "She don't know what she's walking into," but Clara didn't flinch. Neither did Cole. He studied her. From the worn-down boots to the patched skirt, the red dirt behind her eyes that said she'd come far and fought harder. Then he tossed a sack of beans onto the counter. "Stove S out back," he said. She didn't thank him, just nodded once and disappeared into the kitchen. It should have ended there. One meal, one rejection, but it didn't. The stove was half broke, the wood damp, and the lard gone rancid, but Clara worked like a woman possessed. By sundown, the scent of cornbread and peppered beans drifted through the saloon thick as a spell. The men stopped laughing. One by one, they quieted. When Cole took the first bite, he didn't speak, just stared at her through the rising steam of his plate. Then he set the plate down and said, "Come back tomorrow." She did. The second day, she brought her own skillet. Third day, her own herbs. By the end of the week, men were coming not for the whiskey but for the stew. She didn't smile much, didn't speak unless spoken to, but the food did all the talking. Cole didn't ask where she came from, didn't ask about the scars on her forearms or why she flinched when doors slammed too loud. And Clara didn't ask why he slept in the saloon office with a shotgun under his cot or why his right hand shook when it got too quiet. They worked, they breathed, they survived. But peace in a place like this doesn't last long. On the 8th day, trouble rode in on a black mare with a silver bit and 3 shadows trailing behind. The man in the saddle wore a velvet coat and a snake-oil grin. His name was Ellis Rook, and Clara went pale the second she saw him. Not just pale, cold. Her hands stilled, her eyes locked, and something in her went quiet the way a field does before a fire. Cole noticed, he always noticed. "You know him?" he asked low as Clara backed into the kitchen. She nodded once. "He knew my mother." Cole waited, but that was all she'd give. Ellis swaggered in like he owned the floorboards. He tipped his hat, scanned the room, and landed his gaze on Clara through the window behind the bar. Then he smiled, slow and cruel. "Well, I'll be," he drawled. "Didn't expect to see a little Miller girl this far from the holler." The room tensed. Cole didn't move, but Clara did. She walked back out with her apron still tied, ladle in hand like it might save her. Her voice came steady, though her eyes burned. "You want food, you pay like the rest." Ellis laughed. "Oh, honey, I ain't come for supper." His men flanked him, one broad, one scarred, one twitchy, all armed. Clara stood her ground. "Then get out." "You forget whose blood you carry?" Ellis asked. "You think a little salt and fire in a pot makes you new." Cole stepped forward then, not fast, not loud, just enough to make Ellis take half a step back. "She works here," Cole said, "and you're done talking." Ellis's smile vanished. "You threatening me, Merritt?" Cole didn't answer, just kept looking. "Fine," Ellis spat, turning on his heel. "But I'll be back. Some debts don't wash out with grease and grit." They left with a slam of the door, and the room exhaled. Cole looked at Clara. "Want to talk about it?" "No," she said. But later, after the lamps were dimmed and the dishes done, she sat on the back steps of the saloon and spoke anyway. "My mother worked for Ellis, cooking mostly, cleaning sometimes, other things, when she had to. When she died, he said I owed him everything she didn't pay. I ran." Cole didn't interrupt, just waited. "I don't want to run anymore." He nodded slowly, "Then don't." The next week passed like a blade on skin, tight and uncertain. Ellis didn't show, but everyone felt him. The food still brought people in, but laughter was quieter now. Clara didn't sleep easy. Neither did Cole. Then on a Thursday morning, thick with heat and dust, a package arrived. Wrapped in burlap. No note. Just a broken ladle and a burned scrap of apron, her old one from back home. Cole handed it to her without a word. That night she asked him how to shoot. "You sure?" he asked. "I can't keep stirring stew while the past sets fire to the porch." He showed her, patient, methodical, firm, the way someone might teach a child to read or a dog to heel. She listened, learned, bled a little. Her aim was shaky, her grip poor, but she didn't flinch. Not once. By the second lesson, she hit the fence post dead center. By the third, the bottles. By the fifth, the lantern. Cole started calling her June, like she was somebody new. Not Miller, not girl, just June. And for a while, that was enough. Then came the fire. It started small, just smoke curling under the kitchen door. But in seconds, the back wall was lit like Judgment Day. Clara screamed for water, and Cole barreled through the saloon with a bucket in each hand. Together they fought it, coughing, sweating, burning. The flames ate fast, too fast. The stove exploded in sparks. The rafters groaned. She grabbed the ledger. He grabbed the rifle. They made it out with singed hair and scorched boots. The saloon half-gutted. The town gathered. Ellis nowhere to be seen, but everyone knew. Clara didn't cry. She stood in the ash with soot on her cheek and whispered, "We rebuild." Cole didn't say no. And that night, with the stars blinking cold above them and the saloon still smoking behind, Clara June looked him dead in the eye and said, "I'm staying. If you're with me, we make a stand." He didn't smile, just nodded once. But in the distance, someone watched from the ridge, spurs glinting in the moonlight, fingers brushing the butt of a revolver. A silent witness, or maybe a warning. The ridge was empty by morning. No tracks in the dust, no trace left behind. But Clara didn't need proof to know Ellis had been watching. Her dreams told her as much. Smoke in the rafters, the hiss of flame licking at her heels, a voice from the past calling her by the name she no longer claimed. She woke before dawn and didn't bother trying to sleep again. Instead, she crept from her cot in what was left of the saloon's back room, stepped barefoot across scorched boards, and began sweeping up ash before the first rooster crowed. By the time Cole stepped through the swinging doors, shirt half-buttoned, hair damp from a bucket wash, Clara had already cleared the floor, stacked the broken chairs, and was bent over a wash basin scrubbing soot from a skillet that hadn't seen mercy from the fire. "You been up long?" he asked. She didn't look at him. "Long enough." Cole stood in the silence for a beat, then crossed to the counter and set down a sack of flour and a tin of salt. "Got these from Hank. He said they're paid for." "I didn't pay him." "I know I did." He paused, watching her scrub. "You don't have to do everything yourself, June." "I do," she said, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her wrist. "Because it's mine now, too." That silenced him, not because he disagreed, but because he understood too well. For a long time, survival had meant solitude, but Clara had changed that, not by asking, but by insisting on staying, by carving out her place between ruin and resistance. The town rallied. They always did after a fire, after a flood, after a death. Folks brought planks, nails, pots, pans. Widow Bellamy sent over a stack of plates wrapped in linen. The preacher offered an old hymnal stand to repurpose as shelving. Kids ran buckets from the well. And the sheriff, an old hound named Epps with more cough than teeth, stood by and muttered, "Don't look like an accident to me." Cole didn't comment. He rarely did. But he saw how Epps watched Clara, saw the way men looked when they believed someone wasn't meant to rise twice. It made his skin itch. "You planning to arrest Ellis?" Cole asked one morning as he helped Epps nail a beam into place. "Can't arrest a shadow," Epps replied. "And you know better than most, ain't no law without proof." That night Cole found Clara behind the saloon, practicing her draw with a carved piece of driftwood shaped like a pistol. She didn't hear him approach. "You hold it too tight," he said quietly. She spun fast, breath catching, but when she saw it was him, her shoulders eased. "I know," she said, "but when I loosen it, it slips." "Because you're trying to force control. Let it balance instead." He stepped close, guiding her hand. His fingers were rough, hers raw. They stood there, hands touching, the space between them charged with something unspoken. When she tried again, the motion was smoother. Not perfect, but better. "Ellis won't stop," she said, eyes on the stars. "Not until he takes something from me, something I can't get back." "He already tried," Cole murmured, "and failed." Clara turned to him then, really looked at him. "Why are you helping me?" He didn't answer right away. Just studied her face, the defiance, the weariness, the determination buried beneath soot and sunburn. "Because I know what it means to fight a man who's got more money than soul," he said. "And because you remind me of someone I once knew." "Who?" "My sister." Clara blinked. She hadn't known he had one. "She died." He nodded once. "Long time ago. Starved while I was off playing hero in a war that wasn't worth the bones it buried." She didn't push for more. Just stepped back, holstered the wooden pistol in her apron and said, "Then let's make sure no one else starves while we've got hands to cook." They rebuilt the kitchen first. Cole did the framing. Clara hung the pans. When the new stove arrived, courtesy of the mayor's wife, who claimed to miss Clara's peach cobbler, they both stood in silence a moment before lighting it together. The first thing she made was cornbread, not because they had much, but because it felt like a beginning. The saloon reopened in pieces. Just 4 tables, 2 barrels of whiskey, and whatever Cole could scrounge for chairs. But people came. Word spread fast that the fire hadn't claimed her spirit. The regulars returned, quiet miners, lonely ranchers, tired schoolteachers. Even Sheriff Epps showed up one evening and left a coin without taking a drink. Then one night, as Clara was wiping down the bar, the door creaked open. Not fast, not loud, but deliberate. A girl stood in the doorway, maybe 16, dirt-smudged face, one boot missing, eyes wide with hunger. Clara moved first. "Kitchen's open," she said, already heading for the back. Cole followed without a word. The girl didn't speak until she had food in her hands. Then, between bites of bread and spoonfuls of stew, she whispered, "He's coming." Clara stilled. "Who?" "Ellis, he's got men. He's mad 'cause you didn't come back. Said he's gonna burn every place you touch." The girl didn't know her name, just her face. Said she'd been told to follow the smoke. Said Ellis's boys left her for dead when she refused to carry their message further. Cole helped her to the cot in the back room. Clara sat beside her long into the night. The next morning the town woke to find warnings etched in the saloon's door. A knife stuck into the frame, a strip of red cloth dangling like a flag. On it, in rough, slanted writing, "She belongs to the ashes." Cole ripped it down without a word. Clara burned it in the stove. But the town had seen. By noon, whispers spread. "She brought this trouble. We don't need her war here. She's just like her mother." The preacher stopped coming. Widow Bellamy took her plates back. Sheriff Epps said nothing but started locking his office at night. Even Hank from the general store offered her salt with a shake of the head. Clara didn't cry, but she didn't cook that day either. Cole found her on the hill above town, where the wind tugged at her skirt and the grave markers leaned like old men. "They want me gone," she said without turning. "Some of them. I can't stay where I'm not wanted." "You think the wind asks permission to blow?" he asked. She finally looked at him. "What if I get you killed?" "Then I die with my boots on, not hiding." It was the most he'd said in a week, maybe a year. She smiled then, small, sad, but real. When they returned to the saloon, the girl, her name was Mina, they'd learned, was waiting with something wrapped in a bloodied cloth. It was a locket. Inside, a photo of a younger Clara beside her mother. The back read, "Belonged to no man." Mina said she'd taken it from Ellis's saddlebag while he slept. Said he'd been drinking hard, saying Clara would come crawling soon enough. Said he was planning to take the town if she didn't. Cole stared at the locket a long time before nodding once. "We sent a message back," he said. That night Clara didn't cook stew. She cooked fire. Hot, spicy, unforgettable, enough to make the tongue burn and the eyes water. She packed it into jars, corked them, tied them with twine. Cole took one and rode out alone. The next morning Ellis found it on his porch, unlabeled but steaming. He opened it, took one bite, and spat blood. The note tied beneath read, "She ain't your mother, she's worse." Ellis's laughter echoed through the hills, not scared, but thrilled. "Good," he said to his men. "Let her burn hotter. I like a fight with flavor." And as he mounted his horse, his eyes flicked toward the road that led west. Straight to Clara June. Ellis didn't ride fast. He didn't have to. When a man believes the road belongs to him, he doesn't race, he arrives. His horses were rested, his men well fed, and his ego carried high in the saddle like a crown. The sun bore down hot and flat, and the dust rose behind them like smoke off a battlefield. 3 days out they came upon a creek where a widowed rancher offered them water. Ellis burned her barn for spite, then paid her $10 for her trouble. He wasn't the kind of man to leave silence in his wake. He left ash, left stories, left fear that grew legs and walked faster than he ever could. Back in town, Clara could feel it. Like a storm behind the horizon, humming in the air, coiling tight inside her gut. She didn't sleep much, barely ate, but she worked. If she was going to stand, she'd stand strong. The saloon was half whole now, one wall still bare, the roof patched with mismatched shingles, but it held. And so did she. Each morning she scrubbed the steps. Each night she taught Mina how to season stew, how to feel heat with her palm instead of trusting flame. And each time she stood at the stove, she imagined her mother behind her, not haunting, not warning, just watching. Cole watched Clara. He didn't hover, didn't speak unless needed, but he was always there, fixing shutters, replacing glass, counting bullets in quiet corners. A man ready to die not for a cause, but for a person. That was rarer, and Clara felt it. Every time their hands brushed, every glance held just a second too long, every silence that stretched not from awkwardness but from recognition. "Why me?" she asked one night, voice low, staring into the fire. Cole didn't pretend not to know the question. He poured another mug of coffee and answered after a pause. "Because you stayed." The words hit harder than anything Ellis had said. But the town hadn't stayed. The people had pulled back like a tide that knew when to run. Even those who liked Clara kept their distance. They'd seen what Ellis could do, heard the rumors, how he broke a man's leg with a grin, how he once buried someone alive just to win a bet. Clara's name tasted like trouble now, and trouble got you buried cheap in red dirt. Still, a few stood with her. Hank from the general store slipped her extra beans and didn't ask for coin. Epps, the sheriff, stayed visible, patrolling longer, leaning on his cane like it mattered. And Mina never left. She followed Clara like a second shadow, learning fast, talking little, and watching everything. She was quiet but not afraid. The kind of girl who'd survive because she'd already learned how. Then came the second warning. A pig slaughtered, dumped on the saloon steps, its stomach slit and stuffed with ashes. Clara didn't scream, she just stared. Cole took it out back and buried it without a word, but the message stuck in their throats all day like smoke that wouldn't lift. "They're getting close," Clara said as they sat out back peeling potatoes. Cole nodded. "You could run." "I won't." "Then we plan." And they did. They locked the windows, bolted the back door, hid supplies, candles, bandages, cartridges, in corners and cracks. Clara moved her cot into the storage room out of sight. Cole showed Mina how to work the trap door under the floorboards, taught her where the rifles were, where to hide the key. The town knew. They watched. They whispered. But they didn't act. Until Ellis arrived. It was a Sunday, sky cloudless, wine still, the kind of day that made everything feel sharp and waiting. Clara was chopping onions when she heard the hooves. She didn't run to the window, just set the knife down and wiped her hands on her apron. Cole was already on the porch, shotgun cradled in his arms like a prayer. Ellis rode in slow just like last time, hat low, mouth grinning, eyes cold. Behind him 5 men, new ones rougher, louder, itching for a fight. "Well, hell," Ellis said, swinging down from his horse. "You sure do clean up pretty after a fire." "Stay on your horse," Cole said, voice calm. Ellis tilted his head. "Now that ain't neighborly." "You're not a neighbor." Ellis laughed. "Depends on who you ask." Clara stepped out then. No apron, no smile, just herself, strong, tired, ready. Ellis's grin widened. "There she is, my little cook." "I'm not yours," Clara said. "Course you are, your mama was. Blood runs thick." Clara stepped forward. "My mother died in a fire you set. She cleaned your mess and you paid her in bruises. I buried her with her hands burned from your stove and her heart cracked from your name. I don't owe you nothing." Ellis's eyes darkened. "That's so." She nodded once. "That's so." The moment stretched. Men shifted. Birds scattered from the trees. And Ellis, slowly, methodically, pulled off his gloves and tucked them into his belt. "You think this place will protect you? This man," he nodded at Cole. "You think you'll build a life out of soup and stubbornness?" "I already have." His jaw twitched. "Then let's see how long it lasts." He turned. Left. Just like that. No violence, no threats, just a promise carved in silence. That night Clara didn't sleep. Neither did Cole. They took turns watching the window. Mina curled up in the storeroom with a rifle across her lap. Nothing came, but the not coming was worse. The waiting. 3 days passed. 4. On the 5th, the preacher's barn burned. No horses inside, just feed, but the message was clear. On the 6th, Hank's windows shattered, rocks with notes tied to them, cook or burn. On the 7th, a woman went missing. Mrs. Jeffries, 60, lame in one leg, found 2 days later near the creek, dazed, rope burns on her wrists. She couldn't remember what happened. "I don't want your war," Sheriff Epps told Cole, "but I'll fight it if I have to." "You might have to." The town was breaking. And Clara knew it. So she called a meeting. Not in the church, not in the schoolhouse, in the saloon. People came slowly, nervous, quiet. Clara stood behind the bar, Cole beside her, Mina near the door, hands clenched. "I didn't ask for this," Clara said, "but it came anyway, and I'm not running." Someone in the crowd said, "But we're not part of it." "You are now," she replied, "because Ellis thinks you are." More silence. Then Hank stepped forward. "So what do we do?" "We stand," Cole said, "together." And one by one they nodded. Not all, not most, but enough. Plans formed, shifts assigned. Epps deputized 3 ranch hands. Hank's boy watched the trail. Widow Bellamy brought molasses cookies and a hatchet. Clara cooked. She made food every night, not because they were hungry, but because it mattered. The smell of stew, the taste of cornbread, the sound of laughter around a table. She fed them hope. And they ate. And they waited. Until the night Ellis struck again. It started with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the thick, unnatural stillness that wraps a town before violence. That night even the dogs didn't bark. The wind didn't blow. The air felt pressed flat. Clara stood at the window long past midnight, watching shadows move in the street, not people, not horses, just darkness shifting like it had breath. Mina was asleep on the cot beside the stove, rifle tucked against her chest like a doll. Cole sat at the table, cleaning his pistol slow and steady, like a priest polishing scripture. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Then, just before 2 bells, the glass shattered. A bottle came screaming through the front window, trailing fire like a comet. It struck the bar and exploded in flame. Clara screamed for Mina and grabbed a pail. Cole was already at the fire with a blanket, stomping it down, coughing through the smoke. Mina rolled off the cot and hit the floor, crawling, dragging the rifle. Outside, hoofbeats, yells, laughter. Cole shouted, "Back door." But it was already too late. Ellis's men came from both ends of the street, rifles in hand, torches raised. One flung another bottle. This one hit the porch and sent flames climbing the railing. Cole fired once, twice, and a rider screamed. Clara pushed Mina toward the trapdoor, shoving her down with one last whisper, "Don't come up, no matter what." Then she ran for the back door, just as it crashed open. 2 men stormed in. One grabbed her by the arm, but she twisted, bit his wrist, and slammed the kettle into his face. He roared and went down. The second reached for her hair. Cole shot him in the thigh, and he collapsed howling. They were outnumbered. More were coming. Cole grabbed Clara's arm and pulled her back into the kitchen. Smoke choked the air now, thick and bitter. The fire was spreading. "We can't hold it," she gasped. "Then we don't," he said. He pointed to the cellar door, the old storage crawlspace behind the stove. They yanked it open and dropped through, pulling it shut just as boots thundered overhead. Clara held her breath in the dark. The earth was cool, the air tight. Above, glass shattered, wood splintered, laughter rang like gunfire. She reached for Cole's hand in the dark. He found hers. They waited. After what felt like hours, silence fell again. A different kind this time. The silence of ruin. When they climbed out, the saloon was gone. Charred beams, collapsed roof, ashes still glowing. Clara fell to her knees. Mina crawled out from the trapdoor across the room, soot-streaked and shaking, but alive. She ran to Clara and wrapped her arms around her waist, sobbing into her apron. They'd survived. But they hadn't won. Not yet. The townsfolk gathered by sunrise. Even those who hadn't stood before, faces pale, eyes wide. Epps limped down the street muttering curses. Hank stood beside him, fists clenched, jaw tight. "They burned it all," someone whispered. Clara rose from the ash. Her dress torn, her hair wild, soot in every line of her skin. She turned to the crowd. "You all saw," she said hoarsely. "He won't stop." No one spoke. Then Widow Bellamy stepped forward and took Clara's hand. "We'll help rebuild." The words were simple, but they cracked something open. More voices followed. "We'll stay. I'll lend my hammer. We ain't letting that bastard win." It wasn't a roar, it was a ripple, but Clara felt it. She stood straighter. Mina dried her tears. Cole lit a cigarette and muttered, "About time." That afternoon they started again, clearing debris, hauling water, hammering nails. And Clara cooked. She set up a fire pit in the street, balanced a skillet on bricks, and made flapjacks for every pair of hands that lifted a beam. The food wasn't perfect, burned edges, undercooked centers, but no one complained. "Better than fear," someone said, and the whole town nodded. But Ellis wasn't done. 3 days later, the preacher was found hanging in his church. No note, no wounds, just dead, like the silence that followed. Sheriff Epps couldn't deny it now. He called a town meeting on the fourth day. "This ain't lawlessness," he said. "This is war." The townsfolk murmured. Some wanted to run, others wanted to stay. Clara stood on the steps of what had once been the saloon and raised her voice. "I can leave," she said. "If that's what you want, I can walk and he might follow." "No," Mina said quietly. "If you leave, he wins." Cole nodded. "If she leaves, we all do." Clara looked out over the crowd. "I didn't bring this war. I just stopped pretending I didn't already live inside it. You can close your doors and hope he skips you, or you can fight." Hank stepped forward. "Then we fight." And so they did. They built barricades, reinforced windows, dug trenches around the schoolhouse. Women melted scrap metal for bullets. Kids fetched water from the creek in shifts. Men took shifts on rooftops, rifles ready. Epps mapped outposts and rotations. Everyone had a job. Everyone had a stake. Clara taught Mina to cook over open flame. They made food that could last: hardtack, jerky, dried beans. Every meal tasted like defiance. Then came the letter, pinned to the church door with a knife. "Leave by Sunday, or we burn what's left, body by body." Cole read it aloud. No one flinched. They fortified instead. Clara and Cole took turns watching the road from the ridge. She brought him coffee. He brought her silence. They didn't need words anymore, not for what passed between them. Something had grown in that fire, in that ruin. Not romance exactly, but something more solid, something earned. The night before Sunday, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by the ashes of the old stove, holding her mother's locket, staring at the last ember like it might speak. Cole found her there just before dawn. "He'll come," she whispered. "I know. Are we ready?" "No." She smiled faintly. "Good." They sat in silence until the sun bled over the hills. Sunday arrived. No one went to church. They went to war. They came at noon. Not at night, not from the shadows, but under the high sun, bold and unflinching. Dust rose on the ridge like a curtain parting for a show no one asked to see. Ellis rode at the center, dressed in black, a crimson scarf tied around his throat like a badge. 12 men rode with him, rifles slung and smiles sharpened. No disguises, no hesitation, just confidence, the kind born of 1,000 unpunished sins. They stopped at the edge of town, waiting. Sheriff Epps stood in the middle of Main Street, hat in hand, spine crooked but spirit intact. "This is your warning," he called, voice raw. "Turn back." Ellis dismounted slow, like he had all the time in the world. "Already gave mine," he said, glancing around. "Didn't listen." "Don't want your kind here," Epps muttered, one hand resting on the butt of his pistol. "Seems like you got plenty of my kind already." Ellis looked toward the rebuilt saloon, toward the patched windows, the dust-covered tables. "All it takes is a spark." And then he nodded once. The first shot came from Ellis's man to the left, a clean crack that clipped Epps's shoulder and dropped him to one knee. Clara screamed from her post atop the schoolhouse roof. Cole fired back. Everything erupted. Gunshots echoed down every alley. Glass shattered. Horses screamed. Clara ducked behind the chimney and reloaded, breath ragged. She could see Ellis walking slow up the street like he was on a stroll, smoke curling behind him. A bullet grazed her cheek. She didn't flinch. Below, Hank tackled one of Ellis's men near the well. They rolled in the dirt, fists swinging. Widow Bellamy stood in the bakery doorway with a shotgun and dropped 2 in quick succession, both hitting the same rider who tried to flank the alley. Mina crawled across the saloon floor, shoving bullets toward the rear window where she and Clara had practiced aiming for weeks. Cole stood in the street, unmoving, waiting. Ellis saw him and slowed. "This where you die, preacher," Ellis called. "I ain't a preacher." "You sound like one. All that hope, all that fire, think you're gonna save her." "No." Clara watched from above as Cole raised his rifle. I think she already saved herself. Ellis didn't blink. He just smiled. Then he drew. The gunfight between them wasn't clean. It wasn't pretty. Cole hit Ellis first in the thigh. Ellis staggered, dropped to a knee, and fired back. His bullet struck Cole's shoulder. Clara screamed again and tried to shoot but missed wide. Mina hit one of Ellis's men in the side, the boy spinning off his horse like a rag. Then Ellis stood again. Limping, bleeding, but grinning. He turned and ran. Not far, just toward the church. Clara scrambled down the ladder and sprinted after him, boots slipping on blood-slick boards. She burst through the double doors just in time to see Ellis collapse near the pulpit, coughing, one hand pressed to his wound. He looked up and laughed. "You really think this ends with you?" he rasped. Clara raised her rifle. His laugh turned to a cough. "You shoot me and you become me." "No," she whispered. "I shoot you because I survived you." She didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. Instead, she lowered the rifle and walked closer. "You don't get to take anything else," she said. "Not my mother, not this town, not me." Ellis leaned back, blood soaking his coat. "You think they'll thank you? You think Cole will stay, that they'll stop seeing her in your eyes?" Clara stepped closer. "They don't have to," she said. "I see me." And then Mina appeared behind her, holding a second rifle, her hands shaking but her eyes steady. "She don't have to do it," the girl said quietly, "but I can." Clara looked back. "No," she said softly. Then she turned to Ellis. "You'll live." Ellis's face twisted. "Mercy." "No," Clara said, "a trial." He tried to laugh but only spat blood. Clara looked at Mina. "Go get Epps." The sheriff limped in minutes later, supported by Hank and Bellamy. His shirt was red with blood, but his badge still glinted. He looked at Ellis, then Clara. "You want him dead?" "No," she said. "Good," Epps muttered, "because I don't kill men on Sundays." And so Ellis Crowley was arrested. He was dragged through the street in chains. The town watched, some silent, some cheering, some just weeping from wounds not visible. Clara sat on the saloon steps and didn't move for a long time. Cole found her after the dust settled. "Bullets out," he said, wincing as he sat beside her. "Epps says he'll live." "I didn't think he'd come that fast," she said. "He didn't." She looked at him. "He came slow," Cole said, "so we could see it." Clara nodded. "I was scared," she admitted. "So was I." She turned her head. "Will you stay?" Cole didn't answer right away. "I've wandered a long time," he said, "but this feels like ground I could rest on." Clara smiled. "I still can't make pie," she warned. "I can live without pie." She leaned her head on his shoulder. They watched the sunset. The town repaired, again, but this time something stayed. Not just boards and beams, but belief. They planted trees in the square, repainted signs. Mina opened a bakery with Clara's help, and Cole built benches outside for people to sit and listen to music. Epps grew slower but louder. Bellamy ran for mayor. Hank proposed to the schoolteacher. And every Sunday Clara cooked. She made peach cobbler now just to prove she could. And every time someone said, "Tastes just like your mother S," she smiled and said, "I ain't her, but I can cook just as good." And no one disagreed. The sky above New Pennance shimmered gold, thick with heat that made the air bend and tremble like everything was still holding its breath. Summer had arrived too early that year, and with it came a strange quiet, not the fearful hush they'd known under Ellis's shadow, but the kind of quiet that follows a storm, when even the birds wait to see what's left standing. In town, folks had begun speaking in full voices again. Doors stayed unlocked longer. The bell above Hank's general store rang steady with trade. And every day, more townsfolk stopped by Clara's rebuilt kitchen, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Still, not everything healed with time. Ellis Crowley hadn't been hanged. Not yet. He sat in a holding cell down in Edgewater, awaiting trial. The papers called it the case of the cowboy tyrant, and folks from all over had begun trickling in to see the woman who brought him down. Clara hated every word of it. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel strong. She just felt tired, tired in the bones. The kind of tired that no amount of rest could fix. The only time it faded even a little was when she was cooking, when her hands were busy and her mind was full of smells and sounds and little tasks that didn't ask for anything but attention. Mina was thriving. The girl rose before dawn, opened the bakery herself, and by the time Clara showed up, the shelves were already filled with steaming loaves and sweet rolls that sold out faster than they could be sliced. She started humming again, even smiling sometimes. Clara would catch her talking to customers with her head tilted, her face bright in ways Clara hadn't seen since before the fire. Cole had taken to building. First it was fences, then chairs, then a whole new porch on Clara's house. She teased him once about needing a hobby and he just shrugged and said, better than shooting. But something flickered in him too. Some weight he carried that he wouldn't name. Some part of him that kept glancing south toward Edgewater, toward the courthouse, like he was waiting for bad news that hadn't arrived yet. Then the letter came. Clara found it folded neatly on her porch rail, no envelope, just her name in thick, careful ink. Inside, 5 words. He's not going to hang. Nothing else. No sender. No reason. Just the truth and the weight of it. Clara sat on the porch long after the sun fell, letter in hand, trying not to feel what she felt. It was Mina who found her first. "What is it?" the girl asked, squinting at her in the dusk. Clara passed her the paper. Mina read it once, twice, then handed it back. "That's not fair." "No," Clara said, "it's not. Can we do anything?" Clara shook her head slowly. "He's got money, connections, stories already twisting in his favor. By the time they're done, I'll be the villain and he'll be a misunderstood fool." Mina crossed her arms. "That ain't how it happened." "Doesn't matter," Clara said softly. "Not to the kind of men who run courtrooms." Later that night, Cole showed up. He didn't knock, just sat on the porch beside her and lit a cigarette. She passed him the letter. He read it, folded it again, said nothing for a long time. Finally, "You want me to go down there?" "No. Just say the word, Clara." She leaned her head back against the wall. "Killing him wouldn't change it, wouldn't make me feel better, wouldn't bring her back." He nodded, took a long drag. "But," she added, "if that letter's true, we need to be ready." "For what?" "For what men like Ellis do when they think the world owes them a second chance." Cole looked out into the dark. "Then we plan." That week they started fortifying again. Not out of panic, out of principle. Cole reinforced the doors. Sheriff Epps ordered more ammunition. Hank started carrying a sidearm, though he could barely aim. Mina dug a root cellar behind the bakery and lined it with candles and dry goods. Everyone knew the storm might not come, but they weren't going to be caught off guard again. And in the middle of it all, life went on. Weddings were planned. Babies were born. Clara hosted her first summer cookout and the whole town came. They ate roasted corn and fresh bread, drank cider and laughed like people who believed in tomorrow again. Clara even danced. Just once, with Cole, a slow, quiet waltz near the fire while Mina played harmonica and the stars blinked down like they'd been watching the whole time. It felt good. But it didn't last. 2 weeks later, word came from Edgewater. Ellis was free. The official reason, insufficient evidence. The unofficial reason, power, money, men who shook hands behind closed doors. Clara got the news from a courier, a boy no older than 15 who handed her the notice and rode off before she could ask questions. She stared at the paper, then dropped it into the fire. When Mina asked what it said, Clara just said, "He's coming." Cole didn't say anything at all. He just went to his cabin, opened the trunk at the foot of his bed, and began checking each bullet by hand. No one ran this time. They'd done that already. This time they prepared. And waited. Ellis didn't come the next day. Or the next week. But the wind shifted. Strangers passed through town, asking quiet questions, watching too closely. A fence post was split near the old schoolhouse. A barn caught fire, then another. Small, precise chaos. The kind that warns instead of strikes. Clara felt her old fear return. Not the loud kind, but the slow-burning fear that hides in the ribs and keeps a woman awake long after the fire's gone out. One night, she found herself back at her mother's grave. It was just a stone, unmarked but for a rusted cross, but it meant something. Clara sat there a long time, hands buried in her lap. "I did what you asked," she whispered. "I stayed, I fought, I fed people, but he's still breathing." The wind blew soft through the grass. She closed her eyes. What now? Footsteps behind her. She turned. Cole. He didn't speak, just sat beside her, shoulder to shoulder. "I keep thinking," she said, "that there's a version of this where I go back to being just a cook." "There is. But I don't trust it." He nodded. "Then, if he comes back, we don't fight like before." Clara looked at him. "What do you mean?" "We don't wait, we don't let him strike first." She stiffened. "You mean go after him?" "I mean stop letting him decide how this ends." It was a line they hadn't crossed yet. But it hung there now, thick in the night. Clara didn't answer. Not yet. But later that week, she started asking questions. Where Ellis had gone, who was riding with him, what towns they passed through, what trails they used. It was Mina who brought her the map, drawn by hand, notes in the margins, routes marked in charcoal. "I heard them talking," the girl said. "Back alley near the freight yard. He's in Pine Brook." "How sure are you?" Mina's face was hard. "Sure enough." Clara studied the map. Pine Brook was 3 days south. Desert country, not much law, perfect for a man like Ellis. That night she and Cole stood by the hitching post, saddling their horses. "You don't have to come," she told him. He didn't even blink, was never not coming. Mina stepped out of the bakery, arms folded. "You're both stubborn." Clara smiled. "Takes one to raise one." They rode out before dawn. Left no note. No goodbye. Only a line in the dirt that said, "This far, no further." The desert stretched out like a lie told too long, wide, empty, unforgiving. Heat shimmered on the horizon, warping the line between earth and sky. Every rock seemed to watch, every shadow seemed to breathe. Cole rode a half-step behind Clara, his eyes scanning the ridge lines, the dips in the dry wash, always looking for movement. Clara kept her focus forward, her jaw clenched, hands tight on the reins. Neither had spoken in hours, but the silence wasn't hollow. It was built from a purpose shared, anger sharpened by betrayal, justice ground down into something simpler. They had come to finish what was supposed to be over. Pine Brook appeared like most desert towns do, sudden, uninvited, half-sunken into the dust. A single crooked street, buildings leaning like drunks, the church steeple broken, the jail more rust than iron. But the saloon was new. That told Clara enough. The kind of man who chose this town didn't hide in the shadows. He sat in the center and dared the world to blink. They arrived near sundown. Clara dismounted first, brushing sweat from her brow, eyes narrowed as she took it in. Cole looped the reins and adjusted the rifle on his shoulder. "You sure?" he asked low. "I know his smell," she said. "He's here." The first set of eyes met them from the porch of the trading post. then a pair from the saloon window, then more, peeking from the blacksmith stall from behind water barrels. Strangers in a town too small for them, men paid to keep mouths shut. Clara and Cole walked straight down the center of the road. No disguise, no hesitation. They stopped outside the saloon doors. Inside, music played, lazy off-tune piano, laughter, the clink of glasses. Cole looked at her, she nodded once. They stepped in. Smoke hit them first, thick and sharp, mingled with sweat and liquor. Men crowded the tables, mostly Ellis's kind, polished boots, two clean coats, eyes that didn't blink long enough to grow guilt. The piano player faltered when he saw Clara. A few heads turned, then more. And at the back, in a high-backed chair like a throne, sat Ellis Crowley. He was dressed better than before. Navy blue coat, gold watch chain. His arm still bore the scar from Cole's bullet, but he moved like it didn't matter. He raised a glass when he saw Clara. "Well," he said, voice smooth and snake-slick, "ain't this a picture?" Clara didn't move. "Thought you'd be halfway to Kansas by now," he went on. "Or married. You strike me as the marrying type." "I'm not here to talk." "Sure you are," Ellis said, rising. "You rode all this way, you want something." Cole stepped forward, hand at his hip, but Clara stopped him with a single breath. "I want you to leave it alone," she said. Ellis laughed. "I'm not the one who rode into someone else's town. I mean new penance, the people, the girl, Cole, me." Ellis walked slowly toward her, his boots thudding soft against the wood. "I gave you that chance once," he said, "and you spat in my face." "You gave me your fist," she snapped, "and your silence and your rage." He shrugged. "Semantics. I'm not asking twice." "No," he said, drawing closer, "you're threatening. You call it what you want." For a moment, the saloon fell completely still. Then Ellis chuckled. "You think I won't kill you right here? You already tried that once." He glanced at Cole, and he didn't finish the job either. Cole raised the rifle. "You blink wrong, I finish it now." But Ellis didn't blink. He stepped even closer, just a breath between him and Clara. "You gonna shoot me in front of all these men?" he asked. "Turn into the killer they said you were?" Clara's voice was low. "No." She stepped back. "I want them to see what you really are, so when you fall no one mourns." Ellis's smile cracked just slightly. "Get out," he snapped. "Back to your town before I forget I'm a gentleman." Clara stared at him. "You were never that." She turned and walked out. Cole followed, rifle still raised. Behind them, the saloon buzzed like a stirred hive. Outside, the heat had settled into something heavy and mean. They reached the horses, mounted slow, rode 2 miles out before stopping at a rocky rise that gave a full view of the town. They made camp there. Not because they were tired, but because they weren't done. Cole started the fire. Clara sat with her back to the rocks, staring down at Pine Brook's flickering lights. "He won't stop," she said. "No," Cole agreed. She looked over at him. "I need you to ask me the hard question." He didn't have to ask. She just waited. Then softly, "Are you ready to kill him?" Clara didn't answer right away. She stared at the flame. Finally, not for revenge, for peace. Cole nodded. "I'll be beside you," he said. The next morning, they rode back. They didn't go through the front gate. They circled wide, cut through a dry creek bed, reached the back of the saloon where a narrow alley gave them cover. They tied the horses and entered through the kitchen door, quiet as ghosts. Clara carried nothing but a knife and her mother's locket. Cole brought a rifle and one final chance. They waited in the shadows until the saloon opened. Ellis came down late, wearing smug like it was sewn into his skin. He poured whiskey, laughed with the men. Then he turned toward the kitchen and saw Clara. For the first time, his smile slipped. She stepped forward. You never wanted peace, she said, only power. Ellis didn't reach for a gun. He reached for a story. They'll hang you for this. No, she said, they'll thank me. And then it happened. Quick. Cole shot the glass from Ellis's hand. The room froze. Clara walked up and set the knife on the bar. You get a choice, she said. One right here, right now. Ellis looked at her, then at the men around him. Then he lunged. Clara ducked low, swept his leg, slammed him to the floor. He rolled, swung wide, caught her in the ribs. Cole fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Try that again, he growled, and I aim lower. Ellis staggered up, blood at the corner of his mouth. You want to die today? Clara asked. I want to win. You already lost. He drew then. Fast. But not fast enough. Clara grabbed the knife, drove it down into the wood beside his hand. Not into him, into the bar. Just close enough. He froze, breathing hard. The men around them had backed away. All watching. Waiting. Cole stepped beside Clara. You want the world to see, it sees now. Ellis's shoulders slumped. He dropped the gun. The sheriff of Pine Brook, an old man who'd been sleeping off a cough, arrived 10 minutes later. He took one look at Ellis, disarmed, bleeding, surrounded by silent men, and said, I never liked you. Then cuffed him. This time there would be no trial. He was wanted elsewhere. Real charges, real witnesses, real justice. Clara and Cole watched as Ellis was led out of town in chains. Not by them, but by the law. When it was done, Clara rode back to New Penance with a full sky above and dust on her shoulders. She didn't cry, didn't laugh, just breathed. And for the first time in her life, the breath came easy. They came home to spring, real spring, green and soft and full of second chances. From the ridge, New Penance looked smaller than Clara remembered, but brighter somehow, like the town itself had exhaled. Smoke curled from chimneys. Children ran free. The saloon doors were painted blue. Mina spotted them first. She tore across the dirt street, all flour and fire, and threw her arms around Clara before either of them could speak. Cole got a hug too, fierce and fast. Then Mina stepped back, trying and failing to pretend she wasn't crying. I made tarts, she said, burned the edges. Clara laughed, the sound light for the first time in years. Perfect. They sat on the porch with coffee and crooked crusts, watching the town go on like it always had. But something had shifted. Not just safety, belonging. Not just survival, home. Cole built a cabin west of town. Mina taught letters and dough. Clara planted squash beside wildflowers, and every Sunday she fed whoever needed feeding. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. One night, lying in the grass, Mina asked, Do you think it's over now? Clara thought for a long time. No, she said finally, but I think we're through the worst of it. And that was enough.